All right, 379. We're going to be patriotic. Our lesson kind of flows into that because it's January, definitely a time for independence. I'm just kidding. You'll see what the lesson's about, but it'll flow right in there to that. So, and plus everybody knows at least the first verse of this one. Maybe we'll just do one verse and we'll be good. You down with that? I've already woken her up. I'm going to be in trouble. All right. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring. Oh, let's do one more. Let's do verse 4. Our fathers, God, to thee, author of liberty, to thee we sing. Long may our land be bright with freedom's holy light. Protect us by thy might, great God our King. Yeah, we did pretty good, so. All right, tonight we're going to be in Exodus 17. I'm kind of vaulting off of Joe's sermon on Sunday. He was talking about Moses, and he just had a good lesson there. And some of the stuff he was saying was reminding me of this part of Israel in the wilderness, and so I thought I just started getting into this lesson. It was totally the opposite of what I was planning on talking about next, and I only had a few days, but it turned out great. So sometimes you just have to get in there and go with it. So, all right, so we're going to read 17 and we're going to read 18 through 16, or 8 through 16. Can't read 18 through 16. That's impossible. Let's read it backwards, but there's no 18. Then came Amalek and fought with Israel in Rephidim. And Moses said unto Joshua, choose us out men and go out, fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses said to him and fought with Amalek. And Moses and Aaron and Hur went up on the top of the hill. And it came to pass when Moses held up his hand that Israel prevailed. And when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands were heavy. And they took a stone and put it underneath him, and put it under him. And he sat thereon. And Aaron and Hur stayed up his hands, and the one on one side and the other on the other side. And his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. And Joshua discomfited Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. And the Lord said unto Moses, write this down for a memorial in a book, and rehearse it in the ears of Joshua. For I will utterly put out the remembrance of Amalek under heaven. And Moses built an altar and called the name of it Jehovah Nisi. For he said, because the Lord hath sworn that the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. All right, so when reading this, two words really stick out in my head, or two parts of this. One, what Moses did was he stuck the rod, which, we'll talk about in a minute more, but he stuck the rod above his head, right, or his staff. And at the end, he said, he built an altar and he called the name of it Jehovah Nisi, which means his banner, right? And we'll talk more about that. But when I thought about a rod or a banner and the manner of what God's talking about here, I thought about flags, right? Nowadays we have flags and banners. Like we just sang that song, and it's about, it's a patriotic song about America. It inspires us, and sometimes the flags inspire us nowadays, right? A lot of people want to hold up American flag or get rid of it nowadays, right? it means something different to different people, but flags can be emotional for people, right? And it's certain things. And one of the most famous that I thought about when doing this was the flags at Iwo Jima, right? Or the flag at Iwo Jima. It's actually two flags, but sorry, I just brought a little bit about it, so I don't forget any details there. But it's definitely one of the most iconic, right? And it was taken by the picture of it, and the photographer was Joe Rosenthal, and it was on February 23rd, 1945. So, what is that? 70, 80, almost 90 years ago, they took this photo, and it won him the Pulitzer Prize. So, that's one of the best photos, right? And if you remember the picture, it's got the 6 Marines holding up the flag, right? And it's a symbol because in the Battle of Iwo Jima, it began on February 19th the same year, and it lasted till March 26th, and it was one of the hardest fought victories. And so it was a big deal when they made it to the top of the hill, that signaled that they won, right? And you've seen other war movies, some people, if you watch those, and a lot of times it is a hill they're trying to conquer, and it's hard to get up a hill because you're at the bottom, and you lose your advantage at the bottom of a hill, right? You lose your line of sight. There's just all types of things. It takes more muscle to go upward and stuff like that. So it's very difficult. And this was a key part of that. And actually, it was the second time they put the flag up, because the first time people didn't see it, so they didn't know, right? And it's important that people know. So they had the Marines go up and put a taller flagstaff up, what do you call that? Flagpole up, so people could actually see that, right? Because what's the point of a flag if you can't see it? So the other people fighting didn't know, right? And that's it's very interesting, because flags now, they just mean flags to us a lot of the time, right? They usually, for one thing, we all know it still stands for something, right? We see the American flag, it stands for America. We have the Awanas flag, right? It means Awanas, right? It's a whole club, and the kids learn Bible verses, and it means, what does it mean, Sammy? Jonah, y'all remember? I always forget it's an acronym for a workman, something not ashamed. I forget the middle A, but you get the point. And then we have the Christian flag, right? And so we think about being a Christian and the red cross for Jesus' blood, right? Those mean things, and they can mean things important to us. And usually that's what they are. They're flags, right? Or the flag of your country. You can have a flag of any country. You can have a flag that means something like a club you're in, right? And you know what those mean, and you can be proud of those. Sometimes you have a banner for the team you like, right? You can have, if you like the Cowboys, which are, I thought were the best team till this week, apparently not, right? But having a Cowboys flag or a Cowboys hat or t-shirt, you could show that you're a fan of those teams, right? Same kind of thing. And I thought about that, and I wanted to name this lesson, Waving God as Your Flag, okay? Because it's important, and that's kind of what's going on here with Moses, and that's what we're going to get into. So we're just going to talk about 3 things and finish up with a 4th point. So the first point is going to be a war going on. Okay, there is a war going on right now, just like with Moses, right, and the Israelites. And then our role in the war, holding up God, and then Jehovah Nisi I want to talk about last. Okay, so there is a war going on, and in this instance in Exodus right here, first they're having a war against Amalek. Okay, and if you don't know him too well, he is kind of like, especially in this instance, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, he is like a shadow of the devil, okay? He is, what we learn in the Bible is you learn that you're either acting with God or you're acting with the devil. There's good and evil. There's not really other choices, right? You're always doing one that's wrong or one that's right. You can even see Peter, Jesus said, "Get behind me, Satan," when Peter said, "You're not going to die. We're not going to let that happen." And he said, "That's the devil talking through you, because that's not God's plan and you're trying to mess up God's plan. Okay, so she's so happy. Getting distracted now. Sorry. So Amalek is like that, and if we flip over to Numbers 24 and hold your spot in Exodus, because we'll be back to it. Numbers 24:20, and I may read a couple more verses other than that. No, I'll probably just read just 20. And when he looked on Amalek, he took up his parable and said, Amalek was the first of the nations, but his latter end shall be he perish forever. Okay, and this is in Numbers. This is it Balaam or Barak? Balaam. And when he was he was like a prophet. And he was talking about, I think this is a story when, like, with the donkey involved and stuff like that, and he would give him prophecy of stuff, and he would try to kind of pay, Balak was trying to pay him to say bad and prophesy bad against Israel, and he was like, well, I can't do that, right? And he did prophesy bad against Amalek, because a lot of the times he was listening to God when he would give these prophecies. Obviously that story had a different ending and stuff like that, but what's important for us is it shows us that Amalek is doomed and he has something bad going on, and he's talking about perishing forever. Okay, so it's more than just Amalek dying right then, because a lot of times God is talking to an example right here, but talking to us forever, right? And so they mean more than just one thing at a time. Okay. The next part I'm talking about is the rod of God. So we're talking about Moses has his rod. It's very interesting here because he talks about. Let's see which verse it is. He says, let's see, in verse 9, he says. He said, tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in mine hand. Okay? What's interesting is this is the first time it's called the rod of God. It's the same, if you think about this rod he has, is Moses' rod. Joe talked about it Sunday when he met God at the burning bush. He came over there. It's like a shepherd's rod, right? So it's a rod that shepherds use. They use it for all kinds of things. They'll get it to... Just like Jesus does with us, like we're sheep, he'll move us places. He's trying to help us. He'll fight off enemies with it. It's kind of like a stick to rule things with and to help people out with, right? And he did so much with it. God showed him how, because like Joe talked about, he said, I can't do this, right? And God was showing him how you can do this. Look, you're going to go and you'll turn your rod into a snake, and then you'll pick it back up and it'll turn it back into a rod, right? He used the same thing when he parted the Red Sea after that. Right? He lifted it up over the Red Sea like God told him to. He used it in the wilderness. God told him to hit the rock or talk to the rock depending on the situation, and he would use the rod to do that. Okay? And he said, and then when other people tried to take over power from Moses, they said, who made you in charge? We want to be in charge. We don't like where you're taking us in this direction, right? And he said, okay. He talked to God, and God told him, say, okay, everybody get your rod, and we'll see who's in charge, and God will show a sign. And his budded, right? And it was Aaron's rod, right? Same thing. And now he's calling it God's rod, okay? And I think this is because he is understanding that God is the one who is doing things with the rod, not himself, which is typical of Moses. He's very humble and he understands these things, right? And so I just thought it was very important to talk about and to understand that it's a physical rod that he's using, but it symbolizes the things that God has put them through and the power that God uses through that rod, right? And I think it could even be, to me it seems like a symbol of God when he's ruling us, right? Moses has a hand of the rod, but it is God he's following, and he's doing that instruction through, right? And it's just very interesting. And then I also thought about it's not against flesh and blood, because in the battle, there are people who go, Joshua and his men go and fight Amalek and his men, but Moses and Aaron and Hur, which are the leaders, they go up on this hill, right? So in my mind, we don't know exactly what it is, but it seems like they went up to like an overlooking place, right? And then there is this battle going on down there, okay? And so they're not really in the battle, they're separate from the battle, right? But they're doing the most important part of the battle, which I thought was very interesting. And if we look at Ephesians 6:12, it says, and we all know this verse, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Okay? So they don't need to fight the battle right there in person, right? And they technically were not fighting the battle there, right? They're not physically fighting the battle, right? Joshua is over there, but technically Joshua's not fighting the battle either, because what happens was, if you lift it up, Joshua wins. If he goes down, then Amalek will start winning, right? So Joshua doesn't really have any part in it. That's very interesting to me, because we always think about that, right? And I'm trying to, we'll talk about that more later. I'm trying to make sure I'm not getting ahead of myself. But I think it's very key to these other points about our role in the war. All right, and the last part of the war going on is, well, what I'm saying is it can seem far away from us, right? We know that verse, we know it's not against flesh and blood, but as humans, we always seem to be in a battle with things in front of us, right? We're battling with people on the radio or TV or people in front of us. I'm upset with somebody I'm driving next to, you know what I mean? We're physically in this physical place. I say that a lot because I had that problem. I'm always right here, right now, with what's going on, and not always paying attention to the spiritual, right? That's the hard part. And I think that we get in, a lot of us get into that, and so we don't always treat our life like we are fighting a battle or in a war. Not that we have to treat it like something negative, but like in a spiritual war that we can be positive through is really what we're thinking of, right? But we need to treat it like it's something that we're working on. I know I can be that way, where if I don't have a call to action right now, I'm just kind of idle, right? I'm kind of lazy about it. And I think most humans are that way, hopefully. 80% of them at least, I know. Or I would say 90%. And as far as Christians, it's probably higher, right? Because that's even harder, because you're talking about the spiritual world, which we're going to talk about a little more going forward. So, all right, so our role in the war, okay? So, in 10 and 12, it says, so Joshua did as Moses said to him, and he fought with Amalek, and Moses and Aaron and Hur went up the hill. And it came to pass, when Moses held his hand up, that Israel prevailed, and when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed, but Moses' hands were heavy, and they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat thereon, and Aaron and Hur standing up his hands, one on one side and the other on the other side, and his hands were steady until the going of the sun down. So this just reminds me, this is the work they're doing right there. Like I said, Joshua's doing the battle. These guys are having a battle with holding the rod up. So what does that mean for us, right? What are we doing right now? We don't have exact instructions from Moses or God right now, right? Okay, you need to go do this. Brother Jim, you're going to do this. Logan, your job is this. Okay, go, right? That would be easy, right? So what are we doing to know those instructions, or are we doing the right things, right? So the first thing I want to talk about is in James 1:22. And they have an understanding of what's going on here. So the first point is learning and living out the word. So James 1:22 again. But ye be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. Okay? So what happens here is Moses says, this is what we're going to do tomorrow. Okay? And then it says they went and did that. Okay? It's a very simple sentence, and you're like, what does that have to do with anything? We hear stuff all the time, right? But the Bible, we were just talking about this in Sunday school with the teens. If you hear something, you're hearing something. The Bible treats hearing as hearing something and then doing it means you heard it. Because you're not, Jesus says, those who hear my word and do it, right? He didn't say those who hear my word, right? They had this funny Christian video that I've seen. It's about this guy says, this is how people are with the Bible. And it says, if your kids treated what you say like the Bible does, and he goes and tells his daughter, hey, you need to clean this room. And she says, okay, Dad, I'm going to do that. And he comes back the next day and the room's not clean. Hey, you said you're going to clean your room. She's like, I know. And I heard what you said. And I wrote every word down. And I did a study about your words, Dad. And I told my friends about what you said, Dad. And he's like, but your room is still dirty. And she's like, well, I'm working on it. It's going to happen. I'm putting a plan together to get those things done when it's the right time. And it kept on happening. And what the point was is we go to church, we learn it. I love that. And she even said that. She was like, Dad, you are right, Dad. You're such a good dad. You're doing awesome, right? Well, then why aren't you listening to him, right? And that's what we do. We hear the word, we come to church, we get all pumped up, and then what do? I got stuff to do. I'm getting back to my normal stuff. I'm not doing something extra. And that's also a hard part about it is when we get into the stuff, it's not like God gives us an open spot to do it, right? He doesn't say, okay, Kevin, I'm putting on your heart to teach the Wednesday night class. And I said, well, I'm just too busy. You need to open up something for me. I can't do that, right? Sometimes you have to cancel your plans. Sometimes the stuff you're doing is not important as you think, right? And you have to change priorities, right? To be saved in the first place, God says you have to find me with all your heart, soul, and mind, right? You have to work hard at it, right? You have to put God above other things, and that's the hard part. For me, that's the living it out is the hardest part for us, and so that's why I want to put it first. Second point is spreading the gospel, okay? And we know from the Great Commission in Matthew 28, that's there. But I want to go to Acts 13. $13:49. That's not the right verse. Oh, there it is. Sorry, I was reading the wrong one. All right, and it says, and the word of the Lord was published throughout all the region. Okay? And actually, let's go back a little bit more, because if you look at 48, and when the Gentiles heard this, they were glad and glorified the word of the Lord. And as many of them were ordained to eternal life believed. Okay? So, and then the word of the Lord was published throughout all the region. So in verse 47, which we're not going to read, but he's talking about, I'll just read it. So hath the Lord commanded us, saying, I have set thee to be a light to the Gentiles, that thou shouldest be for salvation unto the ends of the earth. Okay? And this is important because part of having a flag is that you're flying that flag and you're living out that flag, right? If I say I'm a Christian and I don't do Christian things, I'm flying a flag of Christians are fake, right? Or Christians aren't different. You're just acting just like me, okay? And we do that a lot, but we're supposed to be shining the light of the flag more than we're doing that, right? We're not flying the flag of I'm perfect, but we need to fly the flag of God is doing something different in my life, okay? And that's what I call spreading the gospel. So The reason I thought about that is because after this battle, and they have a few other battles, that they go out into the promised land, into Jericho, and like he sends 2 spies to talk to Rahab, and she already knows who they are, right? The word's gotten around, right? Oh, I know who you guys are because what I would call their flag, right? Their flag, they're under, like we have the flag of the United States because we're under the United States rule, right? We live in the United States. When you're flying God's flag, it means you are in the kingdom of heaven. You are doing what God wants to do, and people see that, right? Even if it's spiritual, people can see that in your physical, what you're doing, okay? And the way you're acting, that's your gospel. And that was more powerful than anything else because it's a lot of battles that would say they would go in there and the people would just run away because God made them scared because they've heard these stories. Some of it's they've heard these stories. Some of it's they just get scared because God makes them. But there's all kinds of things that happen if you read those battles in the Old Testament and you're like, God's pretty amazing because sometimes he would say, I just need 1,000 men, just give me 100, just give me this many people, and they would go against these great armies, and it was God that was important, not the amount of men or the fighting style they had and stuff like that, right? And then our last part I put with the role is prayer. If you look in James 5:16, and I'm saying this, I want to talk prayer. What made me think of praying is what happened is Moses is on the mountain with the brothers, and prayer is they're holding up the rod. Okay, it signifies prayer. Jewish people would pray with their hands up back then, in some instances, and it's talking to God. It's basically they're saying God is in control, so you're praising God, which is like communicating to God and communicating to other people about God, right? Anyway, so to James 5:16. It says, confess your faults to one another and pray for one another that ye may be healed. Effective, fervent prayer of a righteous man may availeth much. Okay? It's just prayer that we need to do. And if we're doing these other things, it's more effective, like James is saying, right? But the reason we're doing prayer is because, like it says, we're fighting against powers and principalities. If I was just fighting against somebody physical, I could just start fighting them, right? I can't fight an angel, okay? I can't learn Kung Fu and go Kung Fu an angel or do the Karate Kid crane kick saw in the movie. Probably can't do that anyway. But if I knew how to do that, if it was even a real thing, it's probably not. It wouldn't matter because an angel is not a physical being, right? I can't physically kick an angel or touch him. Not that the devil would even let me do that. He would probably have some kind of ninja shadow move, which I'm sure y'all are interested in hearing. Just being silly now. All right, so third point I want to talk about is holding up God. Okay, so we learned he's holding up the rod, as we already talked about. But that's not the hard part's not holding up the rod, right? The hard part is holding up the rod as he keeps going, right? I don't know how many of you fixed a ceiling fan before, but that's one of the hardest things to do, just to change a light bulb in a ceiling fan or take that little dome off that makes the light not blind you in the face. My room doesn't have the dome anymore, so I just get blinded because the switch doesn't work and I don't want to change it, so I just unscrew the bulb. But anyway, so if you're putting in a ceiling fan, like really putting one in, that's even worse because you had to hold it there for about 10 minutes. And you could probably get the biggest muscle guy you can go find at a gym to hold up the fan, and it's not going to, he's still going to be hurting in 10 minutes, right? Because holding your arms up in the air is in 5 minutes, all your muscles are activated and you're just shaking and you have to stop and you're like being all weird about it, right? But that's what we need to do, right? We need to hold our hands up for God. But you can see that Moses had help to do it, right? He didn't send Moses up there and just by himself, right? He sent other people with him. And you can see that they put the rocks up, which we'll talk about the next point. But they were literally had 2 guys, one on this side and one on this side, holding up his hands. Like, he's past the point where he can hold it, because the battle doesn't last 10 minutes. And maybe we should do it in the teen class this Sunday, see how long we can hold our hands up. That might work out, Logan. Anyway, so let's go to Hebrews 3. Let's talk about this. Hebrews 3 and 13. And I think we'll read a little bit of the context there as well. Yeah, we'll read 13. 13's fine. But exhort one another daily while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through deceitfulness of sin. Okay? And you can see this all through Paul's epistles. He talks about praying for each other, building each other up. That's what we come to church for, right? So it's important to come to church to build each other up, to hear the word, but to also to fellowship, talk to each other outside of church if possible, right? Talk to each other about personal things. Doesn't mean I'm going to stand up here and tell you my personal things, but I can go to Brother Jim and tell him something in private. He can help me, right? There's a time and a place to tell people about stuff, but everybody can help you. We're all here to help each other. We're all in the same boat, right? We're saved and we still have problems, but this enables us to help each other out and not judge each other, right? And I think that's one of the most important parts of holding up God is continuing that maintenance of getting yourself up to a spot that helps you, right? I know that when I was saved, I didn't go to church for a long time because I was not saved at a church. I wasn't going to one. And when I started coming to church, it was so much easier to live for God in a better way. It was just magnified so much. I just instantly, the first day I met people, I just felt so comfortable. And it was just a weird thing I hadn't experienced probably forever. It was pretty nice. I was probably like 30 years old, and I'm like, man, I just love being here because people are so nice. I don't experience a lot of nice people, I guess. But anyway, so it was like a weight off my back just to have people to be friends with and to help me and not judge me. It was great. All right, so the next point about holding up God is putting the rock under your arms. Okay, so Psalm 188, 22. Oh, did I write that? I wrote that down wrong. There's not 100. My bad. 148, no, that's not it. I don't know where that verse went. My point was going to be, though, it's about the rock. When they put the rock under his arms, if you think about putting a rock, right? It's kind of like making a chair with armrest up there. It holds them up and you don't have to worry about that. And we have that in Jesus, right? We know Jesus is the rock. And even in this scenario, Jesus is also Joshua. They have the same name. In Hebrew, it's Joshua. In Greek, it's Jesus. And he's fighting the war for them while they're up on the hill. But he's also up there with them with the rock, right? Because the rock doesn't move. It's sturdy. He can put his arms up there. And so he didn't have to, his shoulders were sturdy, right? Now he had the people to help him keep his forearms there, right? But we need that other balance too, because sometimes people can't help us, right? Sometimes church members aren't there. Usually it's when we're in sin, right? So Jesus' death and resurrection help us with that sin to get us back up to holding our arms up, right? Because we don't want to, basically, he gets you all the way up here, he's letting you do this part, and people at church helping you do this part, okay, working together. But that's good, because we can't, before we were just like this, right? This is how we hold up God. We don't do anything, right? Jesus came, we've got up here, this is so much easier. It looks funny, but you know what I'm saying. He's already met us halfway. He's technically met us all the way in the battle, but he's letting us do this little part, is what I'm trying to say. He's the rock that helps us underneath our arms, okay? And the last point I want to talk about is Jehovah Nisi. So if back in Exodus, Ezekiel. Back in Exodus, Ezekiel's Joe's regular Wednesday class. Back in Exodus 17 with Moses. 14 and 15 for the verses. Okay, it says, and the Lord said to Moses, this is after the battle's over, right? It says, and the Lord said unto Moses, write this for a memorial in a book and rehearse it in the ears of Joshua, for I will utterly put out a remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. And Moses built an altar and called the name of it Jehovah Nisi. For he said, because the Lord hath sworn that the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. Okay, so this is saying what we read in Numbers earlier. God is still talking about that, which is a different time. Numbers is a different time than Exodus here. If you think about Amalek, they're kind of like calling him like a first warlord back then. He's the first one to battle Israel as a people now, right? They've come out of Egypt. They were slaves. Then they came out and they're battling him. And if you think about the beginning of the Bible, the devil is the first one to battle us to not follow God anymore, right? He's trying to get us out of God's rule. He was the first one to battle God. He doesn't care about what God thinks. He wants everybody to follow him and do what he's doing, right? But it's very interesting here that when he says that, right, he says in verse 16, which I read at the end there, he says, for he said, because the Lord hath sworn that the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. Okay? That means forever, right? He's not here to fight a battle for Moses, and then now he's not here for us, right? He's not here for us, and he's not here for our children when they need him. He's here forever, generation to generation. And I actually forgot to write my other verse. Or maybe it was just here. I can't remember where did I get that? No, it's in verse 14. I'm sorry. So in verse 14, he says, at the very end of it, I will utterly put him out of remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. Okay? So if you think about, we're still reading him here, right? Amalek is here. We're remembering him right now. Okay? So that means this is about the future, right? Technically, I guess we're still know the Bible in heaven, but Amalek will not be remembered because what happens is, if we're talking about the devil here, if we think about it in that terms, the devil is still here, but the Bible says he will throw him in the lake of fire forever and ever, right? And all the sin will go in there, right? And those who don't choose Jesus, and that's what the name is kind of saying here too. God is, we'll get to the banner part in a second, but he's also the one who banishes the devil forever. And he will, it says, wipe away our tears in heaven, right? All those bad things will be gone. And that's what the battle's for. So we know at the end of the battle, that's going to happen because he's promised that to us, right? And he still says it here. What we just read in Numbers, he's talking about it there. The whole Bible, he talks about it. Just like he talked about Jesus coming and then he came, right? He's coming back. He's going to rule over the world. We'll get new bodies. All those promises are here, and it's very interesting. They're all here in this passage we're reading. All right? And then, like I said, he says Jehovah Nisi is the name of the altar. And Jehovah Nisi means the Lord is our banner. Okay? Like I said, I kind of put banner and rod together in one because it's like the ruling stick. It's the what they called it in the excuse me, the concordance was like a standard or a rally point, right? If you think about that, like when they used to use flags in the battle, they would signal all kinds of like parts of the regiment, like a regiment to come up, right? They would signal those people to go back. They would signal people to, you got a white flag for surrender. A flag meant something and it had instructions. And if you think about it as a rallying point, what is a rally point, right? That's where you get together and you rally together and you move forward together, right? So God is the person who we rally around, and technically he does the work too. We're just going with him. So we have to rally with him to do that, okay? And I just thought that was a very interesting part, because that's what the rod was signifying. And when it was up, right, when you think about up, you think on top. And it's just like Logan was talking about yesterday, something about when you shine your light, right, it's best on the top of a hill, right, like the Bible verse says. The rod was only good when you hold it up, right? It doesn't matter when it's down, because it's not doing anything. And that's what the battle is about, is God being up on the top, right, top of the hierarchy, and he's the one in charge, and we need to remember that, right? So let's finish up in Psalm 60 and verse 4. And hey, we're probably going to finish early today, which would be the first time I've ever done that. And 4. And I'm going to read a little bit more of that. I'll start in verse 1. 61. O God, thou castest off. There's a part about the musician. At the front, I'm not reading that. Starting, O God, thou hast cast us off. Thou hast scattered us. Thou hast been displeased. O turn thyself to us again. Thou hast made the earth to tremble. Thou hast broken it. Heal the breaches thereof, for it shaketh. Thou hast showed thy people hard things. Thou hast made us drink the wine of astonishment. Thou hast given a banner to them that fear thee, that it may be displayed because of the truth. Salah. Okay? So we just think about that, just like I was talking about with God, and when they came to the promised land, a lot of people were scared of them. They had heard about what was going on. If you even think about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when they were put in the fire, the king Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he was kind of scared, right? He was like, this God is above all the gods, right? He knew at that time that he wanted to worship himself and other things, and he knew this was the God you need to worship, right? Even him in his backwards world, right? You would think he would be the last one to be saved on that field of, here's my statue, worship me. And he just saw what happened there, because they flew their flag, right? They said, our God's going to save us, and if he doesn't, so be it, right? They held their rod up, and he saw that, and he saw them be saved and what happened by that, and he was convinced, right? And it's the same way we can do that with any problems we're having, and it will help us. And sometimes we don't see the effects. That's the other thing, and I might talk about this Sunday, but we don't always see the effects of what we're doing. But we know if we're holding God's banner up, right, or his rod, that we're doing the right thing, going the right direction, and there will be results, and God will recognize those and understand those, right? And we're doing God's work. So we don't have to see the battle being won down the field, right? They were lucky. They got to see Joshua lose and win, and so they knew they had to do that, right? But we live by faith. We don't have to see that. We can have faith and just move forward and keep doing it, right? And we'll be there. So, all right, we're all done. Any questions? I've done all the talking. You guys have anything about that?